Last week, it emerged that over 1 million people were given visas to work in the UK in the year to March. It's an all-time high. Today, the government announced plans to encourage more highly educated folk to come to the UK to work. The High Potential Individual Scheme will offer graduates from the world's top universities fast-tracked visas. Is the level of immigration to this country simply too high? It's a question posed actually by Claire Fauges, former David Cameron speechwriter in The Times today. Is it too high, regardless of the qualifications of those coming to the UK? Well, let's ponder on this one. Our debate, is the level of immigration to the UK too high? We are joined by the chairman of the think tank Migration Watch UK, Alp Mehmet, who's here in the studio, and Ella Whelan alongside him. I'm not sure to what extent you've got a contrary view. Ella, we'll find out, won't we? Alp, is it too high, legal immigration to the UK?
Of course it's too high. You've been hearing me say that for Lord knows how many years. The fact is that the government told us in the 2019 election and lots of times in elections before that they were going to control immigration, they were going to reduce immigration. In fact,
control and reduce are the same, aren't they? Are not the same. Control and reduce are not the same things.
They're not, but the Prime Minister, when pushed and asked specifically on that point whether, in fact, it means reducing immigration as well, he said, yes, it will. Well, it hasn't turned out that way. Just one point before I go on. You said coming here to work, coming here to live. So including those who come here to work, including students, including families coming here, including those who are coming here for asylum. 55,000 actually applied last year.
Ella Whelan, Claire Fauges, as I say, former David Cameron speechwriter, regular columnist in The Times, sensibly asking the question I thought today, what is too much immigration to this country? I mean, if you'd said to people, I don't know, in the high points of the Brexit conversation, that in this year there would be 1 million extra people coming to the UK legally, I suspect you'd have had quite a bit of shock, and surprise at least.
I think it's really important to point out that the discussion around immigration in this country it's confusing and it's complicated for a variety of reasons. In one sense, trying to gauge public sentiment is quite difficult because lots of people interpreted the Brexit vote as a direct desire to reduce immigration. I might quibble that. I might say that actually it was more about, that distinction between control and reduce is important. But at the same time, if you look at around the time that the sort of Windrush scandal was happening, you had YouGov polls showing that there was huge outrage at the Home Office for what they were doing in relation to those kind of drives to make statements about immigration. We've seen with what's happening in Ukraine, people being very open to opening their houses. Then at the same time, you have, discussions, that Alp has been involved in terms of the amount of resources, can we fit enough people in? So the kind of public sentiment is very hard to gauge on this. It's also the case that a lot of the time, what we're really talking about, the fact is that government won't build houses, it won't set up new schools, it won't invest in the NHS. And so resources are low for all of us. And I think that shouldn't be used as an excuse to shut the door on the level of immigration that we can, that we can deal with.
But what is that level, Alp? What is the level of immigration we can deal with in this island?
A great deal less, if that's not to sound too glib, than it is at the moment. The fact is that our population growth over the last 20 years, 80% of it...
Is it 8 million, 10 million in the last 20 years? What's
9.5 million, really, that is just foreign-born.
Right. And do we think that hospital construction, motorway construction, all the infrastructure stuff has kept at pace with any of that?
Colin, the sad fact is that we're not building enough houses actually to house those who are coming here, let alone those already on the housing register, on the lists waiting for housing around the country. The fact is that it's all happening far too quickly. And it's not just housing. GPs, for example, over the last 6-7 years, we've got 1,700 fewer GPs than we did in 2014-15, I think. We've had 7 million people from abroad registering with GPs since 2010. you can't go on like that, for goodness sake. You've got to reduce it, you've got to control it. And that's the thing. The government has no control over what's going on at the moment.
Doesn't Alp make the key point when he says it's not about immigration, yes or no, it's the speed at which it's happening, it's the scale. That's what bothers people.
Well, it's directly related to the question of the scale and the speed in which a government is providing for its citizens and for, whether it be for immigrants coming in or for people who have been here their whole life. And, for me, what turns my stomach is the idea that governments of both sides, and this has been a problem with the Labour Party for years, it's been a problem, and the Conservative Party as well. The Labour Party's British jobs for British workers kind of flirtation in the past, that the immigration and immigrants are used as a means to excuse governments for their lack of vision around house building, around infrastructure, around job creation. We've got this weird thing at the moment where Priti Patel is trying to make hay and make a kind of name for herself out of saying, we're going to get people here who have PhDs. I can tell you a lot of PhDs are not worth the paper they're written on. And the idea that that's a kind of really great thing, at the same time as then the government wringing their hands and saying, we've got no HGV workers, we've got no one to pick fruit, we've got no one to, man planes at airports and security desks. So you end up having this kind of discussion of good refugees, good immigrants, bad immigrants. And it all feels incredibly instrumental when really we sort of have a common enemy, or at least a common kind of place to blame, which is that all of us could be doing with putting a bit more pressure on a government saying, come up with the goods. If you take something like the Rwanda policy, Rwanda in terms of its population density is far more densely populated than the UK.
There's a lot there. Alp?
Well, perhaps that's why they should be going to Rwanda then, if there's a lot more space there. You could say that about Australia. The fact is...
No, it's more densely populated. So
there are a number of different issues here. One is illegal immigration, which is a separate subject, really. What we're talking about now are the people who are coming here ostensibly to become a part of this society and add to the wealth that we are all going to enjoy. At this sort of rate, not only does it put huge pressure on all of us, but it also means that there's no wealth being created. Productivity has pretty much been at the same level for the last 10, 15 years. Changed very little at all. It may be that GDP actually grows, but GDP per head has not changed at all. All we're doing is creating congestion, we're creating pressures in services, in the NHS, on housing. That's the sort of thing that is happening when immigration is too speedy, too quick and uncontrolled, which is what it is at the moment.
Ella, do you not, maybe rejoice is too strong, do you not derive a bit of satisfaction from what may be happening in the jobs market at the moment, which is people, British cleaners, people working in agriculture, the tanker drivers, the bus drivers, are beginning to see their wages pushed up because they're not going into bat against people who maybe are just coming into the country for a couple of years, sharing accommodation with no great rootedness in this country, but actually a determination to save like crazy and buy a deposit on a flat somewhere else.
I think the setting up a distinction between, that's why I find it so abhorrent, that kind of old Labour Party slogan, British jobs for British workers, setting up a distinction between a worker in Slough and a worker in Barcelona or somewhere or somewhere in Romania is, from my point of view, politically a false distinction, because a worker is a worker and, that old slogan, international workers unite. But there is also a key point, which is that in terms of the economy at the moment, Alp is absolutely right to bring up the point of production and the complete lack of any kind of innovative drive in the British economy at the moment. But the idea that can, the current sort of weird thing that we have with quite high employment and also a decent situation for lots of people in relation to wages would simply be, explained by the fact that we haven't had international immigration.
This is the old Remainer argument, frankly. There is a difference now between the
Remainer... But I'm a leaver, Alp.
Well, I wasn't saying you were. There is a difference, frankly, between work for British workers and a Romanian worker, a Bulgarian worker, or an Indian worker, for that matter. And it's about time that the government started focusing on providing and paying enough, frankly, if the government and these different organisations paid enough, they would get all the workers that they needed.